Good morning and welcome to a very cold recruitment discussion from Jump. But cold not only because the weather's really cold, but obviously the topic leaves most clients very cold and most agencies absolutely freezing when we start to discuss how to raise your fees without batting a client's eyelids, and is it now time to actually increase your fees? As usual, let's kick off with some stats. In a recent survey in the US, business owners said by Cabbage said respondents reported increasing prices by on average 21% across all industries. In the UK, according to the ONS, trading businesses, 42% reported an increase in price of goods and services that they had bought in November 2022 compared to the previous month. So it says that lots of people are putting their prices up. Around a quarter, 26% of trading businesses reported that their turnover had fallen in November 2022 compared to the previous months due to price increases. Early December 2022, 3 out of 10, so 30% trading businesses said they expect to put their prices up in January, with 39% citing the energy crisis as a reason, and more than 28% of businesses reported they were unable to obtain the necessary goods and services, and 23% said they were unable to operate fully because they didn't have the goods and services that they required, which is back to the old supply and demand. So again, a reason why people put their price up is due to supply and demand. And an article in Forbes says, how do you increase your value and prices to replace that bottom 20% of your customers, or the lowest paying 20% of your customer? There's a premium of prices and products that you can add, and they quoted Pareto's law saying that 20% or the top 20% of your clients are more likely to spend more money with you, and they'll be glad to spend more money with you because they see the value in your business. So there's a big question about should we or should we not increase our prices, and that's what we're going to sort of challenge today and get stuck into. Today we have the whole grumpy group today.
Grumpy group.
Grumpy group. Yeah, I was just looking down at everyone there. I thought that looks very grumpy from people. The grumpy group from Jump.
That's opposite of what we are.
This is my normal place. What do you mean?
Well, there you go. Yeah, glad to cheer you up. Look, we have everyone from Jump, not just the grumpy ones from Jump. We have everyone from Jump today to talk about this. Let's kick off, and it's going to be quite an interesting sort of conversation. And Heather, I promise I won't come to you first.
Oh, go on, just for giggles.
Okay, so with the cost of living and business expenses increasing, as we just said, the big question that we get asked, or I'm getting asked constantly now by my clients, is this the right time to increase your fees?
And the very easy answer is yes. I think I'd just add the point that although obviously there is a compelling need to increase fees, and we'll come to discuss how you do it and why in a moment, I don't think that this year is an exception. I think fees need to be reviewed every single year, regardless of the economic cycles. But obviously this year in particular, we have a compelling need to do so, given the inflation that we're all enduring at this moment. Everybody is looking at the increasing costs of running a business, including your clients. And I think that there is no question that we should absolutely be looking to increase fees strategically, and we're going to talk about how we do this very shortly, with immediate impact. Now, I will add that, of course, there are people listening that will say, well, hang on a second, if salaries are popping up, then of course our fees are also increased if we're talking about permanence, which is true, but there's still a need to review average invoice values, and we'll gather that information in a second. But also in respect to temp margins or contract margins, again, I need to look at those things. But it isn't the case that it's a blanket increase, but I'm not going to get in front of myself because, as I said, I think we'll be coming to that in a moment.
Dave?
Yeah, I agree. I think now is the time, almost irrespective of the cost of living and the cost of running your business and the cost of our clients' businesses. I can't recall a time, certainly in the last couple of decades, when our services have been in such demand.
Yep.
And that is almost across all the sectors. Jump covers across its base of 150 or so clients that we work with and support. We've got almost every sector you can imagine, and all of our clients are experiencing a greater demand for their service. The flavors change a little bit, a bit more temp, a bit more contract than perm maybe, but there's still a greater demand. And for that reason, irrespective of the political, economic, all of that, for that reason, there's a very intelligent conversation to be had with those clients about increasing fees.
And just to pick up on that point, Dave, about our positioning as an industry, there was a report out from Hayes yesterday, was on the news. A big spike now, they're claiming, regarding the increase in provision of temporary labour.
Okay,
so it was very interesting, and it's in keeping with what we've always said about these sort of slightly more challenging economic climates. It's the interim desks, the contract, the temp numbers that pick up quicker than perm opportunities. And so I thought that was very, very interesting information coming out.
So I think it's the first time, isn't it? When we talked about, lockdown, when that happened, we said the temp market would come back. No one expected the perm market to come back as quickly as it did, but it came back absolutely both at the same time. And I think this is the time where, it's the first time that we're seeing, as Dave said there, that supply and demand is hugely in our favour. And as we look at the population, or the working population that's available in the UK compared to 10 years ago, there's about a 20% decrease in that working population available in the UK. So supply and demand is only going to get more and more within our favour. And so, as Dave said, I can't see a greater time or a better time to actually go away and start to increase our fees, because more and more clients are going to rely on us to find the talent and procure talent for them and bring talent towards them. And I think now is the time that we step up and start to show what recruitment is worth. And I think it goes back to the questions that we're going to ask later on about how to increase your fees, because it's all about the value that we provide to our clients. And that's what we're going to start to understand. If we provide a better value service proposition to our clients, then increasing our fees shouldn't be a problem. Heather, I know you were sort of wondering where you can add to this.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all with what you're saying, but I would just say that it's not a blanket thing, and I know we'll talk about this in more detail later on. There are all of our clients on here will know that they have one or two clients of their own where they're teetering on the brink of, is this going to be a challenging year for them? And I think we have to use some discretion about putting fees up, not wanting to be the straw that broke the camel's back in those narrow circumstances. But broadly, in most cases, I completely agree with what Dave and Howard and Paul have said.
Also, just on that quick point, and without wishing to alarm anybody, one of the things that we really need to be over as businesses is credit control, particularly during difficult times. I had a call from a client this morning. I'm not naming names, obviously, but they have a client that sound as if they're in trouble. And as a result, there are 3 placements that were due to start that will not be starting now, and they're owed some money, and so on and so on. I mean, hopefully not as gloomy as it sounds. We'll figure out how we move it forward, but it's a sign of the times, and I just raised that. Make sure you keep super tight on your credit control.
So let's sort of move the question sort of a little bit further more into the functional side of what we're doing. Okay, so irrespective of timing, lots of agencies fear increasing fees. So how do we quell this fear?
Well, Howard, quick question. Where's the fear coming? Is it the fear of the consultants? Is it the fear of the owners? Where's this fear coming from, do you think?
I think the fear is coming from everyone. You've got to understand, Paul, that you came from Office Angels, where you actually every year increased your fees. Irrespective, you went to increase your fees by the rate of inflation and move that. And so it's a natural thing from your point of view. But I'm speaking to lots of clients that probably haven't increased their fees in 5, 10, 15 years, if they've increased them at all, ever, since they put their fees on. And there is that fear that the client is king, and therefore the client will push back, as the fear of losing their clients irrespective, because there's so much competition out there, rather than thinking the other way about what are you providing to your clients. So I think the fear is in the owners. I think the fear is in the consultants going away and having that conversation. I think the fear is widespread across the marketplace, and it's how do we quell that fear to enable people to go away and have a logical conversation with your client. Because we go back to that trust advisor piece where you start with that rapport and you create good rapport, but you've got to see a two-way street between each where you both feel there's equal opportunity for you both to prosper from there, and that's pulled together by logic. And I think to quell the fear, we've got to find the logical reasons why we're going to increase our fees to change it, because it's an uncomfortable place. It's a lot bigger. As Heather said there, some clients were not going to accept this because they may be on the brink of going. Other clients won't accept if they think they're going to get elsewhere. And I think there's that uncomfortable feeling within the recruitment market of going to ask for a client for a fee increase, because forever we get pushed backwards on any increase that we ask for. So I think it's about time that we started to sort of look at how we can do that. And it's the logic behind it, I think, that will quell the fear that people have got and enable us to go forward and start to ask for, increased fees. But it's not just about asking the fees, it's having the logic behind that question. I think that sort of sets it apart.
And we as a business, the people in it, many people who work in this industry don't understand the value that they add, and they don't shout loudly enough about it. And it's that whole piece about valuing what we do and really making sure our consultants understand that, okay, they get, if they have to do calls, they get pushback, but that doesn't mean that the clients we've got good relationships don't absolutely value us, and that we aren't utterly intrinsic to their success, because we are.
Absolutely. And I think the point here, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, I managed to get Howard to answer his own question. I thought very skillfully.
Well done, Paul.
I thought that too. I think this point about quelling fear is an important question. And, I could raise an eyebrow or two when we talk about businesses that haven't raised their fees for several years, because suddenly, we've got a rampant inflation at the moment, but we have had increases in terms of costs every year. So leaving fees where they are for a prolonged period of time is simply not a good solution. I think, picking up on your point, Heather, it's a question of making sure two things occur. Number one, that our own people understand that what we're trying to do here is safeguard our business, safeguard their jobs, their livelihoods, their opportunity to earn decent bonus and so forth, and ensure that as a business we can continue to function and provide our clients with the service levels that they've come to acknowledge and appreciate. And that can't be done if our profit levels are diminishing, even to the point where it's becoming difficult for us. So there is a compelling need to do these things in terms of increasing charges. It's not about greed. It's not about trying to profiteer. It is about maintaining a profitable, healthy business for everybody's benefit, the people that work in it, and indeed our candidates and clients. The second thing, and you've touched on it, is that we should be having regular conversations, and I'm talking face-to-face meetings. That trusted advisor point is valid with our clients, so that none of this comes as any great shock that we're having these conversations. And we shouldn't be in a position where we're having to make major increases to our charges. They should be fairly minor incremental changes that we put onto our charges on an annual basis, creeping up charges in line with inflation. So these are conversations that we do need to have face-to-face with people. It's not a blanket email that goes out. It's too sensitive. We need these conversations face-to-face. But our own people need to understand the logic behind why we're doing these things. And I think it starts there.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a mindset thing for us as owners. I think that's the first conversation, because so often, and I've done this so many times, I've had a conversation with myself, playing myself and the client. And I have decided what the client is going to tell me.
You know what they say about people who talk to themselves, Dave Pye, don't you?
I talk to myself because I find myself fascinating.
I was going to say, does it help you to sleep, Dave?
You end up having a conversation with yourself, and we do this all the time on lots of different things. Or maybe I do. Maybe I am certified. I don't know. But you end up convincing yourself that your client is going to tell you things that you don't want to hear. And by the time you've role played it in your mind's eye and you've had that conversation, you end up saying, no, I can't do it. What if I lose the client? What if they go elsewhere? What if somebody else does it? And before you know it, your mindset is such that you don't think you're worth doing what Heather was saying.
Yeah.
So I think the first part of the conversation is actually to have the confidence to say to yourself, actually, I'm going to ask, and this is why, without all the negatives, because 9 times out of 10, the client will listen to you, will understand. And even on the one time where they may say no, for whatever reason, there'll just be an intelligent debate and discussion.
Exactly.
And if you don't ask, then
You don't get.
You don't get.
Well, I think it boils down to we hold the client on the pedestal, don't we? And when we start to think about it in that fashion, we think that the client won't take an increase because we're so used to dropping our prices to try win the client, because they can get the product cheaper potentially elsewhere. Well, yes, they may be able to go to another recruitment agency, but it's all about the levels of service. And I think, again, we've got to step our levels of service up. And we keep talking about the client, but if we had candidates and we penetrated the candidate market in a deeper fashion and had candidates available when the clients needed it, then we can provide a more slicker, faster, quicker service. And that way, when we come to charge and talk about charges, we have a genuine reason to increase our charges. So we've got to think about the services that we're selling. We sell our recruitment services. We never talk about how we attract and retain candidates and how we develop candidates with them. And once they start to understand the amount of work that goes into developing a candidate database, then they start to see the logic of why they should pay more, because it will give them fresher talent quicker and faster than they've had before. And so we've got to understand, we've got to get more inside the client's mindset in what they're doing, but we've got to get more inside the candidate database and grow that candidate database to ensure that we're doing. And I had this conversation with a client. I've had it this week with a client. I've had it a couple of weeks before with the clients. And when you look at the size of the database, let's say you've got 20,000 people on your database. If you just took 20% of that, it's 4,000, and they want to pay 10% of those people. That's 400 candidates that you're going to place, but they're 400 candidates that are probably available for work. But have you got 400 candidates that you know that are available for work? But I bet on your database, if you penetrated your database deep enough, you'd find 400 candidates that are available for work if you've got a database that size. But we're not marketing to them. We're not pushing them out into the marketplace. We wait for them to come to us rather than us to go to them. That's the money, that's the product we make our money. So what's the logical reason? That's the fear that we have, because we don't actually have a product to sell. We just have services, and everyone can sell the same service. So we need to sort of change what we're selling and how we're going to our clients and working from there. So when increasing fees, what are the main 2 things you need to get in place before doing so?
Well, I think it's anticipating is the word I would use at the situation. So we, in our industry, and I see it all of the time, we agree fees with clients with no formal communication about how long that agreed percentage is going to be in place for, as far as perms or the margin for temps. Now, I've always, and you can ask any of my clients, they know this, we've had these conversations, I've always insisted that we have written confirmation of whatever fee we're agreeing with a review date. So if it's for a one-off only vacancy, the email says this is for this vacancy only. If it's an agreed fee for a period of time, I'm personally of the opinion it shouldn't go longer than 12 months, at which point we have a review date. Review doesn't mean increase, doesn't mean decrease, it means a review. In other words, we've already in advance agreed that we will sit down with the client and discuss the margin at a suitable point in the future. What we don't want to do is pin ourselves into a situation where there is nothing in writing concerning the agreed fee level. And so it goes on in perpetuity, which I see all of the time everywhere. This isn't the way I was, as it were, brought up. And I'm always telling people that whatever we agree, which is fine, there needs to be something in writing denoting that at some point in the future, we're going to sit down with the client and have that conversation. So it's getting ahead. One of the other things I did, and you mentioned Office Angels, but in our terms and conditions of business, as far as the provision of temporary staff was concerned, and it was also in those days on the back of the timesheets as well, we stated, and it was part of the terms, that annually the charge rate would be reviewed, and would be increased in line with whatever the average rate of inflation had been over the previous 12 months, according to the RPI, the Retail Price Index. Now, again, and to Dave's point, that was a conversation that we would have with clients. And we would start at a certain position. Sometimes clients would accept that. We would negotiate with others, and occasionally we would back off if we felt that commercially that was the right call. The point here I'm making, and I don't know if it's 2 points, but I think the point here is that we were in control, and I think it becomes a real challenge if you haven't got those things in place from the outset.
Don't you think it's, Paul, what you're describing is really about mindset? So your terms and conditions and all of those things are tools that are supporting, you know, a cultural behavior set, you know, that expectation that, well, of course, we're going to have a conversation about your fee level and that it changes, because, you know, well, that's just a natural part of the conversation we have with clients. And so you're setting up an expectation with everybody that, of course, we're going to do that. And in some ways, actually, to go back to the previous question, that's one of the things that takes the fear away. Something we're just used to doing. It's normal.
It's true. I mean, and sorry, Dave, but, you know, if we step outside of our industry, look at our own private lives, you know, you do a deal with, I don't know, a particular satellite company, I won't mention names, and you have an agreement for a period of time, and at the point at which that then comes up to expire, they try to push up the fees. There's a conversation that you have, and you agree a new fee. And I could say that about any other deal you do, whether it's a mobile phone or anything else. We accept the fact that privately in our lives, whatever agreements we set up, whether it's mortgage rates or anything else, there is a point of review. Why don't we apply that logic to our own businesses? Sorry, Dave, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I mean, to Heather's point, I think it's a mindset thing. I think the two things you need to agree is if you're running your own company and you own it 100%, then it's your decision. Yeah, and you may want to do a sounding board just to make sure that your thinking's right. But if not, then you need to agree with your board or your partners that this is the approach you're going to take, rather than one person saying arbitrarily we're going to go for price increases. So I think before you ever have those conversations, you need to have that agreement as a board. This is the value we bring to our clients, and this is the next phase how we're going to articulate that and put the prices up. And the other thing, and this sounds so simple, but I say it because of the conversation I had with the client last week. You need to know what your costs are. We've all said the prices have gone up, and this has gone up 10% and this 15%. Has it for you? What are your costs? What are your running costs today, as opposed to, let's say, November last year? We all have management accounts, we can look at it. But actually, what about the cost of doing business? Are your consultants still working with clients that aren't giving you the work, the value that they deserve? Are they turning around candidate interviews at an appropriate level in a tight market? So there's a lot of cost that goes on in your business that doesn't actually include money. It includes time. So are you aware of how your costs of doing business have changed? And if you know that, and you are aware, and then with your board or with yourself or with your partners, you can agree that you're going to to ask your prices to be increased. I also, one other thing to say, I actually prefer the phrase, we all know it's about prices going up, but I prefer the phrase, and we used this last week, we are aligning our prices with the market, rather than we are putting the prices up. Of course, nobody is not intelligent enough to know that prices are going up, but it just comes across as a better way of approaching it, rather than saying we're putting our prices up, we're aligning them with the market.
Yep.
I think when we start to look at this, I think the first thing I'd be looking to do is to create that internal team, so it doesn't just rest on one person's shoulders, i.e. the owner's shoulders. You create an internal team where you're taking data from your back office, data from your front office, and you're looking at what you should be doing with regarding to get everybody involved in that decision, so they see why we're making the decision. So your internal team creates that continuity from your staff point of view, that everyone's on board. And then I think the second thing you need to think about is what Heather sort of alluded to, is you think about your current standing with your clients. You know, what is the current position that they're in? What position are they doing? So some clients you should be going to have that conversation about rate increases. Some clients you might sort of go and look at how you can improve their recruitment process, keep the rates the same, but if you want to take more from the client, but at the same rate. So actually having a deeper conversation with them. So understanding your standing within your client base, and then having an internal team looking at how that you can increase rates means that people do it by, you know, group rather than by individuals, but it's not an individual decision that people are making, it's a group decision from there. I think it's important that when we start to look at this, that everyone needs to be on board, because we all know what it's like when you're not on board with something, you simply just don't sell it, or if you don't sell it with any passion, and therefore you just come back, well, clients reject it, and you don't have the data to come back and argue why or debate why you should be increasing prices. And that's the bit that you're talking about there, Dave, is you know, having that full understanding of why those prices should go up. So, you know, I think that communication across the whole of the business, getting them involved in developing the strategy to do that, and understanding your standing in your client base will enable you to identify clients that will definitely potentially take the increase, those that are question marks and maybes, and those that we maybe should be looking at a different solution to. And I think that's the way we should start to think about putting prices and driving prices, rather than just the blanket, think about what we can do from there. So that leads to that question: should it be a blanket increase? We've sort of touched on it, but should it be a blanket increase across all clients or only some?
So I don't think it's a blanket increase, and I think, to pick up on a point you just made, we are, I'm sure everybody listening are involved in PSLs, and so there'll be review dates hopefully embedded into those PSLs. And as a consequence, you can't just simply increase charges where you've already agreed a charge rate with a PSL. Again, back to my earlier point, hopefully there's a review date in there. So I think those things are important. I also think, picking up on your point, Howard, let's be clear, this is a chance to actually sit down and have an in-depth conversation with your client. Now, there's a trade-off. If you're going to hold your price, then perhaps there's an opportunity to get more volume, for example, or you can potentially trade off increasing charges for exclusivity or retain opportunities. I think that this isn't just the case that we are, and it's very a blunt instrument, we're increasing our charges. No, I think this is an opportunity to sit down and have a strategic conversation with clients. In certain circumstances, I'm sure everybody listening would agree, I'd be prepared to hold the line on fees in exchange for something in return. Now, what's that in return? Well, if it's higher volume or it's the opportunity to work exclusively on opportunities, fine, I'll hold the line on my fees. But negotiation is always a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. And this is actually where we started from with this conversation, being fearful of doing these things. This is an opportunity to actually leverage your relationship with a client.
Oh, can I slightly disagree with you?
Yep, you can do that, Heather.
Oh, go get again there, Heather.
Oh, God. In terms of the way our consultants in our businesses see this, I think actually it should be a blanket increase. So I think we should go to our teams with the idea that this is going to happen to everyone, so that if there are people that we're not going to do it for, it's by exception. So that we start from a position that says, do you know what, we're increasing the fees for everybody for this reason. And then, of course, they can make an argument as to why not, or they have those individual negotiations. But I just think there's something culturally about that acceptance of this is a normal part of doing things. Our messaging is this is an across the board.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. And I made the point earlier about the old days with the terms of business for temps, and that was a blanket increase. But I would add, and I just as a point of, I mean, and don't take this in the wrong way, I think it's a point of common sense that if we have agreements in place that are rock solid with clients already based on things like PSLs, then actually they are exceptions, and you would pull them out from that blanket instruction. Yeah.
So I think I'm sort of in both camps here, because I believe that every consultant should be asking every single client that there should be an increase, because if you don't ask, you don't get, full stop, and therefore it becomes habit, and it's about the habit of asking for an increase constantly. But then when the client pushes back, you can then take your judgment of where that client actually stands, and that goes back to understanding your marketplace and your standing within the client. And that means this has to be a face-to-face conversation. This has to be an opportunity to go out and meet your client and have this conversation with them face-to-face. And this might create a deeper relationship, a more two-way street relationship, which means that you can trade variables for either increase of price or a better contract or a better slice of the business, whatever it be. But if we don't ask and we put clients as an exception, or they're our best clients, we daren't ask them, but they might be quite happy to increase. But if we don't ask, we don't get. And I think it's my philosophy. So yes, I don't think it should be a blanket. I think it should be a blanket. We should be all asking and then take a different view on each individual client.
And do you know what's interesting? Some of that fear that we talked about comes from the fact that we assume everybody's going to argue with us because we experience one or two that do. But so often people just don't even.
They just accept it.
You know, when I, as a customer of recruitment services, I never batted an eyelid about somebody telling me, giving me a reasoned argument why the price needed to go up or the price was different than last time.
Well, the slight different disagreement on that I think you're right. They happy to increase their prices or take the price increase if your service is good enough and you're providing a really top service. They will do that, and they're happy to do that. And that's the bit that we've got to start to think about, is our service strong enough to warrant a price increase? If our service isn't strong enough, then you're going to get those arguments back. And that sort of states that your service needs to change or improve. And that then falls back into that training and development arm of your business, how to develop and train your people to give a better service to your clients so you can maintain high fees. You can maintain those high fees. And it's the same as going to if you go to a quality restaurant, the fees are higher because it's a better service, better quality product, presented in a far different way, in a far better way than before. And if you think about it in that, you can go get a steak in any restaurant, but some will cost you 50 quid, some will cost you 10 quid, and it's all based on service and the providing of that service. And that's what we've got to get our heads into, I think.
Yeah, and I think that brings in, Howard, the comment, the Q&A that one of our audience members has put in, that whole thing about added value.
Yeah,
the idea of providing rigor in the system, providing added value services like behavioural assessment, those sorts of things, that absolutely plays into that. Well, what is your service offer?
Yeah, and I was with a client on Friday and we were talking about retained business, and they said, how often should we ask for retained business? And I said, every time someone gives you a job. Not every time you pitch your client, every time a job comes into your business, go sell that opportunity to your client. And they were like, oh, if you don't ask, you don't get. If you just sit there and go, well, I've signed a deal at 15%, and I'm happy to do that, then that's all you ever get in your business of asking every single time. Recruitment process is a change in our sales process. It's a change in our mindset. So the question then, what will help that is, what data would help create the logical reasons to a client why you're increasing your fees?
So everyone's heard the expression lies, damn lies, and statistics. This tends to be one of those statements.
Suggesting we lie to our clients.
No, I'm about to say the opposite. I think what you don't want, which relates to that statement, is to go in with sort of controversial numbers and figures that everyone can see through. I think what you do need to do is to, and I think Dave made the point a moment ago, is be acutely aware of your cost position, what percentage your costs have increased by across the board. And equally, I think, and it's not just about where we're at right now, because you don't want to be knocking on the door again in 3 months asking for another increase. It's also about looking ahead to establish where you're going over the next 12 months as a business in relation to costs and so forth. So it is the opposite to that lies, damn lies, and statistics. Is actually having the data that is well-founded, well thought through, can be backed up comfortably, and to be able to have that conversation with people, not just about your own business, but also to be acutely aware of the sort of swirling economic wins, if you like, that are sort of around us presently, and all of that information is out there in the news and of course on the net and so forth. So it's making sure you've done your homework so that you can have a logical, well-grounded conversation. Keep in mind as well, your clients are having similar conversations with their clients. It's not something that's alien to them. So you do not want to be coming to them with some kind of vague reason as to why you're increasing your charges. You need to make sure that the information you're putting forward has a strong basis. And if they recognize that, and back to the point, if they value your service levels, and hopefully that is the case, they will, as Heather said, they'll nod their heads and say, okay, fine, I understand. And that's the way forward. So I think it is making sure you've done your homework.
I think also for many of, we could talk about clients as companies when the reality is they're individual people who work for companies.
Yeah.
Many of the individual people we talk to also have to justify the request that we have made. And so we need to arm them with the information. So if you're in the healthcare sector, there's a shortage of nurses, this is what it's looking like. Here's the data among our client base or among the client base. The REC has a wealth of data that you can use to support any of the conversations and arguments that you want to make. And it's that sort of approach that helps your individual client, your individual person, to be able to say, yeah, I agree, or I'm going to take it to my boss and we're going to have a discussion, or take it to my board or my sales team and we're going to make a decision and come back to you. The more information you can give them, let the data decide. I say that all the time, let the data decide. And the data at the moment is telling us there's a shortage of people, and the service that we provide is even more important than it ever has been.
So I think it's a bit of a two-way street, isn't it? You've got your data that says, this is the cost of increase to our service, this is a cost of what's come to us, etc. And we're passing some of that cost on to you, not all of the cost, but we're passing some of that cost on. The other side is what we're talking about there is looking at the data in the marketplace to say, this is the candidate shortage, this is what we can do, this is what we can help, and you can look at that. The third set of data, which is the bit that we tend to ignore, is what can we do to improve the client's recruitment processes and the client's retention rates within their employment basis to reduce the overall cost of recruitment. Because remember, recruitment starts when they ask for a person and when the person actually leaves the business. So if we can increase the tenure of that people, etc., and things like that, and give them ways that we can do that, then a price increase is very simple. And I remember doing this with, going from with a business going from, contingency to around about 60% retained. And we increased our prices from 15% to 25%. And we increased our average fee from about 5K to just short of 18K. And it was all based on, we can provide a better service. We can provide a better way of servicing you, and we can help you improve your recruitment and retention processes, which will increase your productivity and reduce your overall costs. If they understand that and clients see that, then it's a logical sell, it's a logical upsell, and most people took it and bought it from there. So we've got to give that logical reason constantly, and as Dave, you keep saying, and have said today as well, let the data decide and then use the data properly, and that has to be a face-to-face. And as you said, Dave, you're talking sometimes to the person that isn't the decision maker who's got to go and talk to that person. So the more we help that person bridge that gap, the easier it will be.
Actually, Dave's talking to himself as it happens.
I talked to myself. I agreed that I was right, and then I decided to do it.
Well, from where I'm looking, Dave, I can see your lips moving, but nothing's coming out. So here's the look. So we're all worried about this. So what if the client says no? Are we going to ruin our relationship?
No, I don't think we're going to ruin our relationship. We're not going in with some kind of sort of severe and a draconian conversation. We're doing this, and it's never going to be that kind of confrontation. We're going to have a conversation with people. We're going to have a very logical, intelligent, business-like conversation. And if the client says no, then we need to step back from that conversation, understand why they're saying no, and come to some reasonable conclusions. If it's no, then, as I said a moment ago, is there something that we can have in return for holding the fees? If it's no, and there is no extra business, but they're having, as Heather mentioned, a few financial issues, then okay, we show some understanding. We want to be a long-term partner to that organization. We make a commercial decision about that. And if it's no, then okay, it may be no for a good reason. But again, we put a review date on when we go back and have that conversation again. And it's not left to hang around in the ether. We make a call on that. And at every step, you're having a conversation. And there's no reason why having that conversation with the client should result in anything acrimonious. At all times, we're in control of the outcome.
Yeah. I mean, if in asking the question, the relationship suddenly becomes acrimonious, you didn't have a relationship, you just had a transactional person or conversation. There wasn't much of a relationship there, because you can always you can always swing it a different way. In October last year, one of the clients I was working with went to their client and said, we need to put our prices up, but we don't want to. Is there another way that we can do something where we can save us putting the prices up, but we can get something back in return?
Yeah.
And the thing they got back in return was from the managers of that client, decisions on CV interviews within 24 hours. Now you look at that and think, well, that makes perfect sense. They should be doing that anyway, but they weren't. And they put an SLA in place that every CV they sent, they'd get a turnaround in 24 hours. And the time that it saved the agency, the cost of that time, was quite significant. The price didn't go up. There wasn't any increase in fees or margin, but actually they're going to make more money on that particular client because of that decision.
That's a great idea. Really like that, Dave.
Yeah.
I think the comment, although I've shaved the 10% bit off for some reason, from Warren Buffett, actually says it all. The single most important decision in evaluating a business is pricing power. If you've got the power to raise prices without losing a business to a competitor, you've got a good business. If you have to have a prayer session before rising the prices by 10%, then you've got a terrible business. Yeah. And I think that's the bit that we fear ourselves, that we've got a terrible business, when actually we've got a really good business, and therefore we should be proud and pleased to go and ask for a price increase. And I think that's the bit that we've got to sort of get into our heads, that we've got good businesses, but our clients are going to be the arbiter of that, because it's their perception whether our business is good or not, and therefore we've got to increase our services. So I think we've got to start to really drive that as a mantra, that if we're going to start to increase our business, we've got to have a better relationship. Now, if they say no, they say no. That's the only thing they can do. It's what else can you get? As Dave said, it's what else can you get in return? So the final question, and this is the one that sort of, is always an interesting one. When you increase fees, what's the best way to approach your client?
Well, I kind of already touched on this point, that the way I would do it is to be planning ahead by ensuring that every time, and I think it's fair to say it is every time. When was the last time you came across any recruitment business that were able to charge at full rate card? It's hardly ever, let's put it that way. So it's virtually every fee we agree has to have something in writing attached to it via email, recorded on the CRM, of course, that stipulates that there will be a point, and it's a calendar point, excuse me, in time, when we will have a conversation with the client about the actual fee level, a review date. And so if this is embedded into the processes, and I want to emphasize the word embedded, isn't something we kind of remember from time to time, it's embedded in everything we do, then you start to get to a point where it becomes less of a concern, because you've got these calendar dates in play already, and getting the meeting set up with the clients is a given. And that's the best way to approach it, on the premise that it's regimented, it's embedded in the processes, and it stops becoming something of a trauma, which is really where we started this conversation. How do you stop people getting frightened? Well, you embed it into your SLAs, the whole methodology of dealing with customers.
I think that's it, isn't it? It's about just normalizing it. It
Yeah.
becomes a normal part of everyday business. Yeah, and I think Gordon's suggestion in the comments is a really valid one. You know, right now people are expecting it. So let's when we're talking to our team, let's not us be too worried about it as leaders of the business. Let's just normalize it.
Absolutely. And just a point that Gordon makes is that, people are saying, okay, fine, we understand. And that has been, and I pointed out in my response that my clients have come back with similar stories where clients have been understanding that we have to do it. You could argue the opposite, which is that you don't want clients thinking, I got away with it. They didn't approach me, lucky me. I mean, that is not where you want to be. So I think inevitably you have to have these conversations. And I said it at the beginning, and I'm going to repeat it. This is about safeguarding the health and wealth of your business. It's not just your business, it's the people that work with you. It's their business too. It's their livelihoods, their ability to keep their heads above water during difficult economic times, taking care of themselves, their families, and so forth. This is an imperative. It's not a nice to have. It's something you have to do.
So I think from my point of view that, we're right in what we're saying. It should be a face-to-face. We should have a communication strategy, a communication plan, and we should be tracking it. What's working, what's not working. We should be evolving it constantly as we're going from one client to the next client to the next client, looking at what the objections are from the clients. Can we then work on those objections? Can we improve it? So for the next time we go and pitch it to the next client, we've already improved our opportunity to win. And I think we've got to think about, as Gordon said, adding value, what value that we do add and how we do that. And to me, this is an opportunity to actually get out and meet your client base and discuss not just what we tend to discuss in recruitment, which is what are you doing today? What job have you got for me today? What job can I fill today? This is about looking at our clients over the next 12, 18 months. What are they doing? What problems are they going to have? When do they need the staff? So we can start to be a little bit more proactive than reactive in the recruitment marketplace, which again then helps with the biggest thing that we've all got the problem with is that candidate attraction, because it's hard to catch a candidate now if they want the candidate tomorrow, but it's easy if we knew 5-6 weeks ago to attract that candidate to start today if we've got a longer lead period to work into that. So I think we've got to start to go to clients and be more honest and upfront about our services and what we're doing. We need to have a proper communication plan with them, have the genuine reasons why we're going to increase our prices, track it, and then be process proud, but never satisfied of that increased process, and always review it after every session where we've asked, and we should be asking it every single time. Dave, anything to add?
Just to say, do it face to face, do it with data, do it with confidence.
That's a good strapline, that is, Dave. I'd definitely market that. That's pretty good.
That'll be a new career looming for you, Dave.
Ben Triggerson talking to himself, and
hold on, I've just agreed that that's not. My voice has just said, don't do that.
So that's where we're going to finish today. But next week, what we're going to talk about is bottlenecks in your process. And to me, this is a bottleneck in one of your processes, that if we're not asking for increases, then that's a bottleneck in your process. So next week, we're going to look at some of the processes that we should be doing, could be doing, that will add value to your clients, increase your profitability by decreasing either the speed, the time, etc., that it takes to do the job, and therefore we can add more value. And maybe sometimes we don't have to give price increases if we can, as Dave has explained, reduce their recruitment process and get a faster cost to model that costs us less to run. So that's what we're going to do next week. So guys, thank you very much for today. Much appreciated. Thanks for all your input. Thanks for coming and attending, everybody. We look forward to seeing you all next week.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
See you, team.